Welcome everybody to the next edition of Rally's Founder Talks. Today's guest is Kunal Patel. Kunal, one of the things we like to say at Rally, or is important for you to know about Rally, is what we're looking to transform Orlando into is an international hub for social entrepreneurship. And so what that means is that any social entrepreneur who's at the early stage of their journey, we want Orlando to be one of the stops that they make along the way. And so the way that we make Orlando as attractive is that we showcase not only the resources we have, like with Rally, but then also the people here. And so you're one of those people in Orlando that we're using to show the value and worth of Orlando as a hub for social entrepreneurs. So not to put a lot of pressure on you to perform, but our whole funding next year is dependent on you and you alone. And so,
oh, okay. Well, thank you for the honor. Thank you for the honor.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so
I can help.
Not really though. No, I'll just joking.
I hope I don't screw it up for you.
Yeah, don't mess it up. Kunal, it's, you and I have an interesting relationship. Obviously, we have some background from Detroit, Michigan. I like to say that I was at the very beginning of one of the best relationships you have in your life, the most important relationships, which is your wife. I remember when y'all first met. I knew that she had it in for you because I could see it in her eyes, but you were still kind of like somewhere else. I was like, man, she has a bullseye painted on you, and she got you.
She got me.
She got you.
Yeah, she got me.
She got you, and that's been a good thing to watch. Going to the wedding and watching you have a child here. But then the other thing is just our background and work together in like the tech space and the startup space, and so you've been around in that space a lot. And so today what I want to do is I want to focus on, we're going to walk kind of through your journey, right? So I want to start at the beginning. I want to start with baby Kunal.
Okay.
And kind of like, think about baby Kunal and the influences or things that were around you that were glimpses of you, or either encouraged you to become an entrepreneur or gave you glimpses of what that looked like. And then once we get out of there, then we'll start tracking through your story a little bit, and we'll end on Brand XR and kind of what your experience there. And then what we want to do is get a few nuggets, that practical pieces of wisdom that you've learned through your journey about entrepreneurship for our fellows and those who watch. So Kunal, tell us a little bit about baby Kunal.
Okay. So with baby Kunal was being taken care of by two immigrant parents. I was, I grew up in Detroit, but I was born in New York. So my parents came from India. They met here in America and got married. And my dad ran a newspaper stand in New York, and my mom was a waitress at Dunkin' Donuts. And they were just came with no money. They were trying to make enough money to make it. They had me, and there was an opportunity in Detroit where my dad had a sister, and so they moved over there. And again, just being very entrepreneurial. My dad, delivered pizzas and bread in the morning, and newspapers. So he was like delivering like on 3 different jobs. And I think again, my mom worked as a waitress at Dunkin' Donuts. So like I just remember like the smell of donuts all the time as a little kid.
Were you able to? Did she bring donuts home?
She did, yeah, on occasion. And so they were just saving up money, and then I remember they actually teamed up and I think bought a motel. So this is something that's very common to a lot of Indians. Like, there's a saying like Patel, hotel, motel. Indians just generally have like really kind of taken over the hospitality industry. Um,
Is there a reason for that? I'm just curious why that is an
you know,
attractive
I want to
industry.
say, so it was like, my view on it is, not that it was easy, but it was like something that could be tackled. So basically, you would find, let's just say, four Indian brothers would all move into a motel that not only had rooms, but had like a little house as well, where like the office was built into the house and you could stay there, and like all of them would stay there and then raise enough money, make enough money until they could have two motels, and then the brothers would split up, and you keep doing this until each brother had their own motel. And then, that's how they made their money, and they would just do that, and then eventually they'd trade up and get a bigger motel, or eventually a hotel.
Like sounds like
That's
Monopoly, man.
a little bit, yeah, a little bit. I don't know, maybe it's like, part of like coming to America, and then it's just like, hey, what game should we play? Monopoly. Oh, this is great. I know what to do.
Right.
So yeah, my parents did that. But again, just like more entrepreneurial stuff. It's like, eh, running a business. I would just see it all around me. They also owned an Indian grocery store. So,
In
that was
Detroit
like
or somewhere
in Detroit,
outside
yeah, in a suburb called Dearborn Heights.
in different ways.
So they had a store. It's called Apna Bazaar, which in Hindi means like our store. Not very creative, but so they had an Indian grocery store, and I saw a lot of different things of like, oh, they had to find the right distributor. They didn't like the price, so they had to find, like, negotiate. I saw they got like big giant bags of like lentils and rice and all these different things, and they would have to then break it up into smaller ones. And I became child labor a little bit, in the back. I would like take scoops and make it in smaller bags and seal it with like this
Yeah.
plastic sealer. Um, but I saw my mom, like, dealing with all these customers, and customers that want to negotiate on price. Um, at the time, there was obviously no Netflix or anything. There's VHS tapes, and so they would rent Indian movies. And I think I remember like being impressed that my mom created basically the predecessor to Netflix. She, I think she realized like, okay, I could rent these movies, you know, for some rate, every single time they rent it, or I could
Right.
get people on a subscription service, and they can come and they can trade in their movie anytime they want.
Wait,
So
so your
like,
mother got people on subscription service?
yeah,
Oh, that is awesome.
yeah, like it's like, hey, just I don't remember what the amount was, but basically people paid a single amount, and they could then view as many movies as they want, but they had to come back to the store to like, hey, here's the VHS tape, and I want the next one. And she just built up like quite a bit of subscribers that way. Um,
That is awesome.
yeah, if she had stuck with it, yeah, maybe that could have been Netflix. But uh, so I just started seeing like a lot of what my parents did, and it was just lots of different businesses, like Indian grocery
Yeah.
stores, motels, um, and even my dad had like a candy distribution like business too. So I
Okay.
suppose like that bug of entrepreneurship like kind of came in there.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's what we usually it's cool to start off these talks with understanding the background, because you can see how I'm not necessarily sure if entrepreneur is like nature versus nurture. I think there's a little bit maybe of both. There's
yeah,
definitely some elements that are nature, but definitely nurture. Like if you're around it, you see it, and that's not it's well, what I find is on these talks is that it's not uncommon that people have had a lot of people who in their lives who have influenced them, who have been entrepreneurs or business owners, and because they grew up around that, they tend to gravitate towards that. Ben, I was thinking about this with you. Did you see entrepreneurship as a baby Ben, or was that something you just kind of fell into?
No, I think that I did see some like that when you have parents who um, solve problems, like do things that they may or may not be trained to do, or start things that then people follow and come along. And you have these parents who are serving donuts at Dunkin' Donuts, and all of a sudden people are believably coming into their grocery store or to their motel, and you know them just as people, not as grocers or hoteliers, but everyone else sees them as believable. You realize that there's no special magic thing that gets poured over someone in order to be able to own a business. You realize it's just regular people solving problems about where am I going to find the rice, how am I going to get these movies. And it's easy to underestimate that critical, like, dose of confidence or believability if you can get it when you're a kid. So much of, I think, successful entrepreneurship is not being daunted by problems that you don't know solutions to yet, being willing to kind of run into a problem and find solutions, and believe that just because you don't have the answer yet doesn't mean you can't find it. And watching parents, that's really getting
Yeah.
in that sense.
Yeah. Kanal, so what was your first business? Like, what's the first business you started?
Oh, so
Like, I'll
I
tell you my
suppose
first
I
business.
suppose it's the same business, like, but you know, I grew up in Detroit. It was near the, Kyle, you may know this area or not, but like it was near the corner of Evergreen and Joy Road.
Oh yeah.
And
Wait,
so wait, what?
wait, did you live in that right there, Evergreen and Jordan Road?
Yeah,
Oh
that's
man,
yeah. So we had our home was there, and when I was little, it it got more rough as I got a little bit older. So like I remember when I was a little kid, it was still good. Like you know, we played out in the streets, knew all of our neighbors. I think we even still left the door open, which is not something you do in Detroit at the time. But it was a friendly neighborhood and things like that. Um, and I was friends with a lot of the other kids, and I think I don't remember all the kids, but there was at least three of us where we started a raking and shoveling business. So like, there was a lot of trees and there'd be a lot of leaves. So we would go to the neighbors and just say, could we rake your lawn, and then, when winter came, could we shovel your driveway? And we didn't charge that much now that I think about it.
what did
I
you
think
charge? I'm curious because I had the same
we're,
business.
we were charging between $10 and $20.
Oh man,
Um,
you making gold.
Yeah, that's good
I
money.
thought
10,
I,
20
I
bucks
think
is
at the
good money.
time it felt like good money, but now when I think about the amount of effort that went into it and the amount of
myself.
man,
Maybe that's why I'm so big, because I charge $5 to shovel
yeah,
your car out, and
No,
so everybody gave me money, and so I just did a lot of labor and got
yeah,
when
some
you're a
gold.
kid, you got extra energy, so that's fine. You can devalue your energy level because that you got that in abundance when you're a kid.
yeah, yeah. That's true. That's true.
Oh man.
But yeah, it was that. It wasn't a lemonade stand, but yeah, it was just taking to the
People in Detroit
environment we
don't
had.
do lemonade stands. Like
Yeah,
that's, but definitely the raking and the snow, because the first snow would hit, and the thing you want to do is get out the house and get to people's doors early in the morning, because they needed their car shoveled out, right? They didn't want to do that. And they
yeah.
were willing to toss you in my case, $5, $10 in order for you to do that. So yeah, no, that's really cool. So let's talk about, um, so you baby Kanal grows up, learns about entrepreneurship through his parents. Um, sees the inner workings of operating a business, takes that knowledge and applies it. Goes to college. As an adult, what was your first real entrepreneurial experience?
So I because like there's a kind of a little bit of a winding journey like right before I would say I got out of college.
Mm.
So when I was there was like a little defining thing that I didn't realize happened in my childhood until I was probably in my 20s. So, I went into technology, I went into the sciences, I went into something creative with video game development. So there's art background there. And when I studied in college, I studied computer science and I studied computer animation. Um, and when I was growing up, when people asked what I want to be, I would always say I want to be a scientist and I want to be an artist. And I would always say those two together. And I guess I never really realized like in the end that's what I did. Like that's what I ended up in is I
Yeah.
ended up in the sciences and the arts. Um but like it was something in elementary school while I was in the Detroit public school system that happened that I think like caused that. And I think it was important because like that's kind of like woven into a lot of my entrepreneurial like efforts and work. I think it was around third grade, fourth grade. Our school lost a lot of funding, and I just remember our art class was going to go away. Our science class, like the science teacher said, "Hey, we're not going to have as much money, so we can't do all the things that we've been doing." And they said like, "But don't worry, we're still going to have a lot of fun. We're still going to do a lot of things." And I remember my art teacher became my social studies teacher. And I remember like vividly him like starting class, then going to peek outside the door to see that the principal has walked by and he's
Mm.
not going to check in. And then he would come out and bring out art supplies. And so he would tell us, like, keep it a secret. We're not supposed to do art, but we're going to do art. And so, I think out of and this is a conversation I heard between like the science and math teacher. He's like, hey, we're not going to let these kids down.
Yeah.
So it was a case of like, I think the teachers probably out of their own pocket or own accord decided, hey, we're still going to keep doing the things that we're going to do, um, even if we're not going to have the funding or we're being told not to. And so like, yeah, the science teacher was still doing like really cool things,
Yeah.
you know, still getting art. And so that bit of effort, I want to say it was like an investment that didn't pay dividends for like 20 years, and I don't know if those teachers hadn't done that, I think an entire generation might have been lost.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't have done the things that I did in my 20s and now 30s unless like that bit of effort was done back then. And so now I carry that with me in a lot of the entrepreneurial things I do, because I realize, hey, if we're doing really good things for our community, we're doing things for the community around us, then it's going to have a payoff, with all of our kids. Maybe not now, but definitely in the future.
Yeah.
Um, so that bit of effort like drove me into like, hey, in college I was going to do computer science and art. And originally I started doing medicine, like any good Indian, like like it's there's definitely pressure like become a doctor, but my
That's
parents were
what I just
supportive.
recently learned. Like, that there's like to go into medicine. Like, there's certain fields that are considered elite or coveted in the Indian
Yeah,
family, and medicine is
yeah,
one of them. Yeah.
yeah. I think it comes from like that my parents' generation that came with no money and had to do like all of these different jobs and all these entrepreneurial things and deliver bread and do all that. And those parents are like, we don't want you to have it as hard as we did. So, if you now go to college and now we can afford to put you through school, become, a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, or something like that.
Right.
So
Because
you can
buildings will
build.
always need to be built. People
Yeah.
will always get sick, and people will always get in trouble. So maybe it was a turning one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. Does that
but
explain why you? Does that explain like this whole helping out thing? Does it explain why you started
I,
Indienomicon? Also,
yeah, yeah,
helping.
yeah. I think like that's the thing that like drove me to do a lot of this stuff, like the community building, um, community learning events, trying to create opportunities. Really, I think it was the case of like wanting, um, if somebody really has the talent and drive, uh, I really wanted there to be an opportunity for that person. Because I just feel like I've seen a lot of really talented artists, a lot of really talented, smart people, um, that maybe don't have the opportunities, that don't have all the resources. And so having that community of Indienomicon where we brought all the game developers together, the programmers, artists, designers, musicians, it just created that community of like, oh, hey, you're releasing a game. Have you done this, this, this? Like, hey, what help do you need? So doing all that. And it was just because I felt like if you don't have that supportive group around you, then you could really get lost. Like, you know, back in Detroit, like if we didn't have those teachers, we didn't have those people that showed they cared for us, then we could have been lost. I mean, I know plenty of friends that didn't have my teachers, and you know, it sounds cliche on things coming from Detroit, but it's like they're in jail, or they're dead, or they're not around. And it's like I kind of saw it that like if you don't have that right support system around you and you don't have the right community and drivers, like you could really miss out on a lot of really great things. So yeah, I wanted an opportunity for anybody that was talented and creative in Orlando, um, to have it. So that's why I drove so hard on Indienomicon and other things that I did,
Right.
um, and things like that.
Um, and then the Indienomicon actually you extended that to children because I remember us having a conversation about children in disadvantaged communities, and I just
Yeah.
remember that now, that you were offering um, game development coursework or um, you're teaching game development to kids in bite-sized pieces where it scaled up, but given the idea was providing a roadmap to getting into a place where potentially they could get a job entry
Yeah.
level at a studio, right? And so I thought that was
Yep.
really cool that you do it. So which now I understand why that piece resonates with you. I'm listening to the story, why you end up doing that, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Um,
But I guess the original question was like entrepreneurial journey when I became an adult. So I guess the other thing that happened was I was very shy growing up. Um, you know, so I was definitely, you know, an engineer, like very scientific. I was shy, but I ended up realizing, I guess over time, that you have to be a little bit outspoken to get something in life. Otherwise, like you won't get anything. So part of it was just like I had to pretend to be one of the cool kids who talked, and then eventually just stuck. Like, so it's like, oh, I'm just gonna talk like all these other kids talk. And then and I don't know. And then I just ended up having enough practice at talking. Um,
because of
but
much community stuff you do, I mean, you have to be able to talk.
yeah,
So,
yeah, and so like it's just something that happened over these like that early adulthood of like working in some different tech endeavors. Like I sold computers at like a computer shop, so I had to convince people like, hey, why they should look at this and not this, or
mm,
getting to know their story and find out like how can this actually weave into their story, you know, and like why this is going to be good for them. um but I would say like overall I was the least socially awkward engineer, and so because of that I got put into a lot of leadership opportunities. And I was like, oh, you understand the tech and you can elaborate on it and not be, you know, as
Yeah.
shy or so weird in the way you talk. So yeah, least socially awkward engineer, and then that gave me a lot of opportunities.
I remember that someone who understood tech and could translate it to the regular everyday people was definitely is a skill set, and I can see how that helps you because most tech folks when they talk to you, well, who build tech, um, it's hard for them to translate or to the everyday person, right? Because it's but if you can learn to be, and I realize like there's whole jobs around this, like people who simply go figure out, talk to customers, figure out what the issues are, and then translate that to tech, or translate the tech in a way that makes sense to customers. One of the things I like about your description of bringing XR was that you call it the Squarespace of XR, which is like XR is that it's not is that augmented reality or is that something different?
So XR is like kind of a catch-all term now, of like, because like, when people talk about AR, they all say like AR VR, or they say VR, or they say MR, like, or mixed reality or virtual reality, or there's all these different like
Oh,
words and terms. And so XR is just basically used to kind of encompass, it's an umbrella term for all those digital content within a 3D spatial, like,
yeah,
use case, right? So it's like, it's just basically like virtual reality. They have view of your entire vision. You have a headset on. You are being transported into a different world. Augmented reality, they're putting digital elements into your world, into your field of view. And mixed reality is just really like, I don't know, a supercharged version of augmented reality where like you can actually interact with things.
yeah.
Um, so we
What I
just like,
liked about your definition was that one of the things we're talking about at rallies is the importance of being able to articulate your value proposition. Um, and so one of the like for example, we have a group called Zero Trafficking, which is in the human trafficking. They go out and look at data points and put threat risks on them, and in order, the original goal is to bring down these human trafficking networks in a way
mhm,
that's not transactional. Usually, the way you find out is because there's money flowing and it just looks weird. The way they do is they look at and analyze ads and all kind of things, right? And so they have like phone numbers, addresses, things like that, and they that are then become associated with certain things, and they put threat levels on them. And so the thing they're doing now is that they're providing that solutions to anybody who's dealing with customers like banks, hotels, where they're trying to keep human trafficking out of their business and find human trafficking that currently exists. And so one of the definitions that they come across, or the way they describe it more recently, and this is with the help of Ben, but is the Norton antivirus of human trafficking, right? So, which makes sense because it's all about
yeah.
all of these companies, find, remove, and also prevent human trafficking from existing within their systems. And so, I really like the way that you describe it. Is that something? And I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but is that something that? How long did it take you to come up with that Squarespace for XR? Because that makes
Oh,
perfect sense when I hear that.
yeah.
That's Squarespace.
I mean, I would say, I don't know, maybe it was the first 6 to 9 months, maybe, like, where, it was just so simple to describe it that way when we got there, when I got there. Um,
Right.
but it's so necessary, to kind of like get that idea across to somebody so they can understand it, because it's especially within, augmented and virtual reality, it's not simple technology. There's so many different things at play to make that possible and actually usable. And to try to explain that to somebody, anybody, that needs to use it or wants to try it or build something with it is difficult. So um I think it's all these like little skill sets you have to pick up along the way to realize how important it is. um because I remember even like somebody talking about movies and how movies are sold. Like when creators are pitching a movie to the executives and saying, hey, I need funding to make this movie, they need a really quick and easy way to grab the attention and get the idea across. So, you know, a famous example that I heard of was the movie Aliens,
Hmm.
where, you know, it's Sigourney Weaver back in the late 70s, early 80s. Uh, and even prior to that, there was this movie called Jaws, you know, about a shark. Um,
The movie,
and
by the way,
so,
the movie messed up my entire childhood because I swore
oh my God.
swore that Jaws
No,
existed in my bathtub. Like I would be in a bath with like 4 inches of water and swear that a shark would come up through the bathtub.
I'm a horrible swimmer because like I just didn't want to get into the water as a kid. But what they did in that fear that, you know, people have because of Jaws, like you know, it's very visceral. But you know, when they're trying to sell the concept of this movie called Aliens, hey, we're going to make this movie called Aliens, and like you know, these Marines are going to fight these, you know, you know, I don't even know how you describe these aliens. They're not like gray aliens, you know, with like big
Right.
eyes. Um, but they said, imagine Jaws in space.
Oh, that's terrifying.
And it's like, oh, whoa, now I get it. I'm in space and I'm like, there's this constant dread and this fear that's coming. And then that's what sold it. They're like, oh, I get it. All right, go for it. So, you know, hearing examples like that made me realize like I gotta do the same for brand XR. Like if we're gonna quickly just, you know,
Hmm.
understand things, we need something like that. And when you told me like, you know, Norton antivirus, like I immediately got it. Okay, I get it. That's this thing that
Yeah.
you like basically install into your company's process to like prevent these viruses, these unnecessary, unwanted things, you know, to
Yeah.
infiltrate. So that
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Because, no,
Kunal,
check
one
this.
of the things I like about this conversation so far is like how self-aware you are. So like you understand your motivations, you understand your areas of passion, and I think like sometimes um, entrepreneurs can run towards a unique idea or a solution, and without taking the time to assess why they're particularly passionate about it or in what way they're really well equipped to attack it. And then that can like that can either they can kind of stumble into success because it accidentally aligns with what they're good at, what they're passionate about, or it can be a detractor because it is a good idea, but they're not actually well positioned. They don't have the right team. They don't know the things they're good at. Can you think of a time in one of the companies where you started at like that moment where you realized not only did you have a good idea, but you were the right person to go after trying to start the company to do it? Is there a time where it was like, oh yeah, this is a solution the world needs, and because I have this or this, I'm in a good position to do it?
Uh yeah. I think so. I'm hoping that the this leads into the right thing in terms of what I was attempting. Um, so early on in my career, I became like the IT manager and eventually, I mean, I guess CTO of this plastic manufacturing company. Um, which is nothing I ever planned for, nothing I ever thought like, oh, I'm going to go into plastic manufacturing. It was a software development role with a company that was here in Orlando, and prior to that, I was traveling around and doing IT consulting. It was which was a weird job. Like I would just go from place to place and solve IT problems. Um, and then I was like, I'm traveling way too much. Like I kind of want to be back in Orlando, and so I found this position and I just started rising through the ranks. Um, so started solving all the problems of like this plastic manufacturing company, and and in doing that, I started learning like what worked and what didn't work, and what made things more efficient, what were like huge pain points for me as, the IT director, and then just handling all technology. So then I was like, I can do this for other people, because I saw that this used to eat up like half of my time during the week. And once I'd implemented, this new process of like handling servers or data or databases, like I save so many hours. Or I have to manage like so many different computers, and there's this same common problem. So if I do this, then other companies will benefit too. So I started evaluating this piece of tech called it's called Pano Logic. It was this green technology. It was like, um I used to sell computers like at a computer shop, and literally it would be like these like desktop computers, and every single desk would have a desktop computer. They'd have a monitor, keyboard, mouse. We still have that kind of stuff today, but like it's all wired and everything, and everybody had one. And then now you can imagine a company that has like over 100 computers, like, and you have like one person that has to manage all of it. It's like you're just running around constantly with like random problems. um like, hey, my mouse is not working, and you realize it's not plugged in, or like, hey, I need this, not able to get in, just do password reset. um and then it was like, oh, my, this is beeping, oh, it's because the battery backup, like the battery died in it. And so I just started learning all these like different pain points, and then I think I just kind of solved everything that there was to do there, and I was getting kind of bored. And the CEO noticed, like, Kunal, everything's working now, like what are you doing? And I was like, I'm just doing some research and stuff. And I don't think he liked that, like I was like just researching on the company dime. You know,
He
but
wants you solving problems. He wants you changing batteries, man.
right, yeah, and so like I was like, I fixed everything. Everything's working. That's me doing my job. Like, but now if I'm just sitting there, now it's like, hey, I'm paying you to sit around. So he actually said like, like, what else? What next? And then I was thinking to myself, like, yeah, I don't want to sit around like this, and I hope I'm not being offensive in saying this, but like I would look at some of the people in the accounting department. Like there was like 4 or 5 girls that were there in the accounting department, and some of them had been there for 30 years, like 30, 35 years. And they're just so bitter and just so angry and just so jaded, and they really hated their jobs. And I was like, I don't want to be like them. Like, they're just so, the world just sucks to them. And I thought, like, I should not do that. I don't want to be here for 30 years. So I thought at that moment, I should start my own company. Um, so I started a tech consulting company, and I told the CEO this, and I said I can do the same kind of things that I did here for other people, and I want to do it. And so the CEO is like, hey, I've got office space. I've got extra office space here. Like, I'll give it to you for like very little rent. So then within the company, I started my own company. And
Wait, did they become a
painting.
customer?
No, it was just like, it was basically like, hey, give me a certain number of hours. I'll give you reduced rent, and we'll still pay you a little something. We'll still pay you something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll pay. Yeah, but so I guess in a way you could say I was they were a customer of mine, but I was still technically an employee. Um, and so in that process, I was like, okay, well, now I got to sell to other people. Like, how do I convince them? And I just had to like figure it out over time. I would talk to this company, Panalogic, that I purchased these green technology devices. They call them thin clients. Um, Actually, they called them zero clients. So they were these little silver cubes that ate 3 watts of power, when normal Dell PCs at the time were eating 200 watts of power. And so, and then even when they go to sleep, they were eating 0.5 watts of power. And so, and there's nothing inside of this. It was like it connects to the network and it's actually running an instance of Windows, like a Windows PC, on the server. So if you buy a big beefy server with like 128 gigs of RAM and at the time, or this much storage space, it's kind of like everybody's computer is running inside of this big computer. And you only have to have this little zero client at each desk, and you plug in the monitor, keyboard, and mouse to it. But the thing costs $150 at first, and I was selling it for $300. Um, but it was like, wow, management is a whole lot less. There's nothing running inside of these cubes. This cube just has to be plugged in. That's it. So
Right.
then I thought, like, okay, this is really useful. And so I would fly over to California to go meet with this company. And, I told them about like the plastic manufacturing company. I said like, hey, we did this. This is all the great stuff that happened. Like, oh wow, we should make a case study about that. And like, yeah, hey, I'll give all the insight into what happened. I'll get you a quote from the CEO, all this kind of stuff. And they're like, wow, great. So because I helped facilitate them getting that case study, and now they could use that to sell um, their product to other people and other folks. They're like, hey, Kunal, like you're saying you have a company of your own now? And I'm like, yeah, and so everything that I did for this company, I'm going to do elsewhere. Um, and they're like, oh, we have a partner program, and so this is what we do. And we have all the same sales material and stuff like that. And so I I basically took their sales training and sales information and all these decks and things like that, and saw like, oh, I can reach out to other companies and try to sell to them. And
Kunal, I love that story because there's like several steps in there where you could have gotten content. And I think that like passion to keep creating is important. And just knowing enough about your story to know that you have just continued to create on top of creations, continue the iteration. I feel like that's a really important step for entrepreneurs, and especially the folks on the call here today. It's like knowing that you can get your startup to a certain level and either get content or get discouraged, but continuing to look for it. So the first step is like solving the problem to where the job is easier, and then not being content, but taking the next step and going, oh, it's going to be more work. There's more risk, but there's more potential payoff. It's more aligned with who I want to be. So I'm going to take the next step in the company, and then starting your own company, and then going out to California to meet this, like, what gives you the position other than it's worth a shot, right? Like,
yeah,
who flies out there to meet the supplier company of this new product and continue to go, well, I might as well try for it. And I think sometimes when we're starting something, we have that initially to say, oh, I want to start this composting business, or I think therapists really need this new solution, or I think nonprofits really need this new development tool. And we can get an initial push to go, but then we can get tired or discouraged or overwhelmed, and we just kind of back off of that constant iteration, taking the next step. Have you had times in your entrepreneurial journey, Kunal, where you've gotten discouraged or feel like you're out of energy? Have you had times like that before?
oh yeah, plenty. um and I suppose maybe this is part of like that Detroit grit and background, and not that it's like necessary that you have like that kind of background to like make it as an entrepreneur, but it's uh,
It
you know
helps.
it helps. It's like it's a grit of like being like life is tough and you got to get past it. You got to have that grit. You fall down. I don't know what's the saying, like, you fall down 7 times, get up 8. Like, it's just like you have to know that you're going to hit a roadblock and there's some way around it. And a lot of times that comes from just talking to other people. In an entrepreneur's like journey, a lot of times it feels lonely. Even sometimes when you're around other people, it can feel lonely because sometimes you have this feeling that like only you understand the problem, um, or like maybe not everybody understands the problem, or the full scope of it. So, you know, you don't want to internalize that like for too long. You want to talk to other people
Hmm.
um, about the challenges you're having. Um, but yeah, I mean, just during that whole journey of like even like forming that partnership with the company that in California, as I was meeting with them, it was like trying to prepare myself like to go meet with them to understand the technology, doing research like on the executives beforehand, the tech, being in the message boards and seeing what other people are saying about things. So then when I spoke confidently. Um, or if I didn't know something, I would say like, "Hey, I don't know this, but could you explain that a little bit more?" And then even when they said like, "Hey, the way we work is we could even send you some leads because we can't get to every place, so we rely on our partners to go and close the sale." And so doing all that, I would go and take these leads, and then I would fail a couple times. It's just like I wasn't getting the response that I was getting, and over time, I used that failure and the successes along the way, but like or the weird ones where I don't know what's going on here, to try to become better. Um, there's things like when I looked at other people selling technology in the marketplace, they were, you know, they're just like older white distinguished gentlemen that wore suits. And so like I was like, how do I become that? And so I just started putting on a suit to go to these meetings. And it was a case of like, all right, let's first like, my tie is crooked, my suit's a little bit too big, and then it starts looking a little bit better. But then even then, still like I felt the conversations weren't good um, during it. And so then I learned a little bit more of how to talk during the meetings. I learned that, at the very beginning, you should get to know the person, like get to know them as a friend, get to know what's new, like how's your day going, what's like, give a little story about your background, just saying like, you won't believe what just happened, yesterday. You give them a little anecdote and they give you an anecdote back. Um, and it was just over time that I realized like in the end, all these people are just people. They're living their lives. They're solving challenges, but they're people. And if you get to know them as people, then they open up a little bit more and they might tell you more of the real problems they're facing in the company. And if you know more of that, then maybe you have an idea on how to help them. And if you
Yeah.
can weave the product that you're selling into that and then they like you, then they might actually buy from you. So then I realized in the end, like me wearing this suit made me maybe just feel a little bit awkward, and maybe that made them feel awkward, like maybe things are way too serious or way too formal at the moment. So I actually just took off the coat and I would not wear a tie and I'd leave it unbuttoned and I'd come in sometimes with my sleeves rolled up, and I felt like a little bit more personable. There was like, oh, I'm meeting with a person. um, or I came across more as a friend. And so when I came across more as a friend, I was able to sell more. They were more willing to like trust me and then buy from me. And I just like was responsive on email to them as well. Um,
So
so yeah.
yeah, so what's interesting is there's a couple things listening to you that are quite interesting. Is that you, as Ben already alluded to, is that there were opportunities that are afforded to you, and what you did was you just continuously iterated the opportunities. So I can see how the very first step is you walk into the classroom, finding out art and science is being taken apart, which this is just kind of just luck, but you so happen to have teachers who were there who taught these two things, chose to teach these two things, although they weren't assigned to it. And then you took that and you kept leveraging it up, right? You kept leveraging all the way, to the point where you went and worked for a company or you went and did CS, computer science, and then you went to work for a company solving their problems, but then realizing, as Ben was saying, that it should have to be more of this, and therefore you then said, I can do this on my own. So then you step out, and then you then go through all these journeys, right? And then ultimately end up creating Economicon, doing the program, coming up with Brand XR. So I can see how Brand XR is has evolved because of the journey you've taken. And then the other thing is that I'm hearing is that you were constantly learning, and not only learning, but using that learning to inform changes. So you were like, you were learning, seeing how people reacted. Oh, like I'm shy, so I need to like talk more because people like to talk more. Like people like people who talk more. Or the meeting's awkward, and as Ben said, you're like very self-aware, and so you're constantly taking those inputs and doing something with those inputs. Which, if you're taking in that many inputs, like what tends to happen is things just evolve, right? Because I always like to say, like, there's a thing I've been working on recently around justice and equality, and the deck that I had, I'll give it to somebody, and within a week, it changes dramatically. Like, man, what happens? Because I'm taking in all these inputs and I'm watching and seeing how people respond, and how it resonates, how they resonate to it. And so I really appreciate the fact of seeing how the hustle and how your experience and journey led to where you are today, and then also how listening and taking those inputs and using them to evolve you. I really appreciate that. I want to be before, because we're about to open up the Q&A. But are there? I mean, you have so much in your journey, but if there are like 2 or 3 things, whether it's around the importance of listening or identifying, selling, making things simple to people, whatever it is, like, are there 2 or 3 nuggets that you could give our fellows that they can use and take away that and apply to their lives? Like, can you think of 2? And then you don't have to rush through them, just take your time and just talk through each one of them.
Right. So I suppose, like, in a lot of cases, like, what brought me success in life, or just, even more opportunities, was really kind of embracing serendipity. Um, and I don't know if that's even the right word. Like, I've heard, it's like serendipity or synchronicity, but I think it's the case of, uh, something is not everything is just going to fall into your lap. You can't just assume that, like, the deal is going to come to you, the right contact is going to come to you. um that stuff, it just doesn't all it's not always magically just going to happen for you, but you can kind of manufacture that. So if you put yourself into positions where you can be in the right environment where something can happen, that's really important. So nobody ever told me I should fly to California, and nobody told me I should go and attend a tech conference, and nobody told me that I should email out to executives at this company that I want to reach out to. Like, in each of those cases, I had to go and do it. And some people never opened the email. Some people maybe opened and said not interested. Maybe some people said, hey, yeah, come on over, take a tour of the company. And then I got to know them a little bit more. Um, so you go to the tech conference, and maybe you meet a couple of people and you find out their story, and they stay in touch, or maybe they introduce you to somebody else. Sometimes it can seem like not a lot of stuff happens for you, but eventually it will. So, like, it's a 3-day tech conference. Maybe on first day, nobody came to you and said, like, hey, here's $1 million. Like, it's not going to happen on the first day, but you'll meet some people across those. And maybe even that first tech conference you go to, like, nothing really even happens. Like, you go to the second one and then something happens. So I want to say, like, you put yourself in those positions, then magical things just simply seem like they will happen.
I like that a lot, Kunal. I talk about it sometimes like you can't take the fourth step until you take the first step, and you don't know necessarily where the second and third step are going to be until you've taken that first one. And
Yeah,
sometimes we can write off the first step because we know we don't want to end up at the end of the first step. We know the goal is not to be a person at a tech conference. Um,
yeah,
but it's moving you in the direction of something, and who knows where that next step will be. And sometimes we can discredit the first step because it doesn't look like the end goal yet. But you can't just jump to the end goal. You've got to walk there one step at a time. That's really cool.
By
yeah.
the way,
That journey is important.
I've been hanging out with you for quite some time. I've never heard you say
Oh, you haven't?
that.
That's because you're always walking, man. I can't keep up with you.
But it does sound like something you would say. Kunal, you have a so that was a good one. Do you have a second piece or a second thing?
Man,
What about, can you talk to us about your journey? Like you found a way to be able to talk to people about complicated things very simply, right? Is there some
yeah.
wisdom that you can give, a nugget of wisdom you can give around that?
Well, I think part of it was just as you talk to more people of different backgrounds, you start to learn how they think, and maybe it's different than the way you think. And so over time, you just learn that, okay, if you're talking to 5 different people from 5 different backgrounds and they understand things differently, or the way they speak to you is different, well, then if you're speaking to a group of people, how do you encompass speaking to all of them in a way that they're going to understand? And so I don't always have the best analogies, but I've found that using analogies helps, because if there's something relatable to many people, then maybe that's the way you can communicate things. Um, like, for example, this is actually an old one that I used, and it was when I was selling computers. And I realized not everybody understood why something was better, or why something was needed. Like, this many gigahertz more, this much, megabytes more. Like, what does this all mean? So I realized I wasn't getting anywhere selling just based on those numbers, because nobody really understood it. So I started using analogies for all the things that everybody understood. Whether you were a grandma, whether you're a Buddhist monk, whether you're an executive guy, no matter what, something that would help cut to the chase, or help explain it. So I remember like selling, these computers, and even like selling higher end ones, because I started using a refrigerator analogy. So when they were trying to understand like what's the hard disk and what's memory and why do I need to buy this uh that's cost so much more, and I would give this analogy of like, well, at home you have a refrigerator, right? And yeah, we have a refrigerator. And like, why don't you, I don't understand, why do you have a refrigerator? Why can't you have the grocery store? You could drive over there in like 10 minutes and they have all the food in the world. Why don't you just drive to the grocery store every time you're hungry? It's like, well, I don't want to drive over there all the time. Like, and then if I just want a sandwich, I'm not going to go and have to buy like an entire loaf of bread and lettuce and all that, and then like bring it back home and then make it and eat it. Like, yeah, that's right. Like, it's all that work. You have to do all that work. You have to go all the way over to the, grocery store every time you're hungry, so you have a fridge. And yeah, so I can get to things faster. So, okay, well, like imagine this, like the RAM in your computer is a refrigerator and the hard disk is a supermarket. So if you want to lead a life, if you want to operate like, very efficiently, you want to like, have more time, then the more RAM you have, that's the bigger fridge you have, so you don't have to go to the grocery store as much. And then everybody got it, and they're like, oh, I get it. Oh, this is why I need more RAM. um and
I was just
like,
thinking that, man. How did you read my mind? I was like, man, I need more RAM.
yeah, yeah. And then they're like, I need a bigger fridge. And so if I have a bigger fridge, then I don't need to go over to the grocery store, and then I save all this time of driving. And I'm like, that's exactly how computers work. And so when you can find these analogies, you can talk to a lot of people at once and try to communicate something. So,
That's right.
I don't claim to have really good analogies, but every once in a while I come across some ones, and they work out
Look,
and they help. So
look,
come
my
up with
man,
some analogies.
that one was gold. So
Yeah.
um, and I got it. So we have 10 minutes. I want to open it up to some Q&A. Fellows, you heard a lot of wisdom from the great Kanal. Is there any
I'm not that
questions that you would like to ask him?
Yeah, thank you, Kunal. This is Charlie. I'm just wondering how you would approach a situation where someone contacts you and you may not see like how you can help one another, or how it's relevant what they do to what you do, but they still want to maybe use an hour of your time to meet for coffee or something. Would you typically say yes to that, or maybe, or no?
So there was a time in my life where I would just take coffee with anybody, like anytime. I just had a lot of time. When I was like extremely single. So like it's like a lot of time I had in my hands. So I would
What
just
is
take coffee
extremely
and like,
single?
yeah.
Is that the same as really married?
Oh, yeah, there is a way to be extremely single. But so I had a lot of time, and so I would do that. But the thing is, everybody, I realized over time is extremely valuable, and you do want to be careful how you spend it, uh, because the time that you're doing one thing is time that you're not doing something else, and sometimes if you just end up seeing like weeks go by and it's like, man, nothing's moving, and maybe you're doing things that are not moving the needle, that's not moving things forward. But at the same time, embracing my advice of serendipity, and like, you don't know, and the people that you meet, there might be something that comes out of it. It's a really fine balance of like trying to maintain enough time to move the needle in all of the goals that you want to hit, but also allowing for like interesting things to happen when you meet people that you don't know. Something that helped me was like using a calendar tool. So having a calendar link. I realized in emails you would do this whole like, when's good for you? Oh, when it's that doesn't work for me. Like, and then they ask when's good for you, and then you give a couple times, and then you do this whole back and forth like of like 3-4 emails trying to figure out when works, and then it cuts closer to the meeting time, and then like, oh, I had a meeting that popped up, I'm sorry I can't make it. And then now you have to go through the same 3-4 emails to reconnect.
Preach it,
so
'cause
so using a calendar link I found like was very helpful to me to avoid all that but still create the time. So using something like Calendly I thought was really good, and then people can book 30 minutes with you, right? Maybe not 60 minutes, but maybe they book 30 minutes with you. And maybe they don't have a full lunch where you give them an hour, but maybe it's a coffee for 20 minutes. Um, so you could still take those. And then if you're using a calendar tool like Google Calendar, you can block off your really important tasks, your really important meetings. And so then that way, Calendly, or these calendar tools, these links that you give out to people and they can pick their own times, they don't conflict with the meetings you've already set that are important. So this way you can take the 20-minute coffee meeting because they took a morning in which you didn't have anything scheduled anyways. And you might end up with like a story or a contact that really is important, um, that you didn't realize at first. And sometimes when it's not apparent on the surface, maybe it just in chatting like two normal human beings, you'll find something in each other's background that makes sense, maybe not for today but maybe tomorrow or in 6 months or something like that. um, so that's the thing, just learn people's stories, and then eventually they might just be a friend. um, but there might be a reason to say like, hey, I remember this, you told me this 3 months ago, and I need your advice again. So just do
No,
that.
you, man, I've been trying to preach this message to Mr. Hoyer for some time. He is resistant. I use the same calendar thing. I use a different tool called Amy, and I have all these different blocks, like virtual meeting, coffee, face to face, different times. There's buffers in them. It is an amazing tool, and so I really love the fact that you drove that home for me. I feel more of a genius because you're doing it, and maybe it's just a Detroit thing. Like people in the South just don't do things like that, right?
Yeah.
But the other thing I really like that you said that resonates with something you already talked about was the fact that you it's the serendipity part. Like you just go. Sometimes it's just the time is there. Why not just go and make a friend or learn something new about someone? Because you never know what that'll turn into. And I've had times where some relationship that was random that happened in some random spot has turned into something amazing down the road, like a few years down the road, or even for someone else, right? That I was able
Yeah.
to leverage for someone else. And so I really appreciate your response. Is there any other questions from fellows?
I would like to say thank you because it was like really motivational to see that, to know that there are people who just pass that way, that entrepreneurship struggles and
Yeah.
they succeed. It's really, really motivational. Thank you.
No, thank you. Yeah. Just keep talking to people and tell them your story, and then you'll get ahead.
Hey, Kunal. This is Abdullah Taru from Tuesday app. Very similar story, man. A similar background, similar way of coming up. Truly admire where you are. I was on your LinkedIn and I saw that you had some experience at Advisor, Orlando Tech 501(c). Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean that was ages ago. Back when, so Orlando Tech has gone through so many iterations as an organization, and so many different people that were leading it. So I mean, I think this was back during when Oret was in charge. Maybe it was like, maybe Carlos Carbonell was there. So anyways, like it was early on during that period, and it was just like sharing connections, sharing, how can we help the community? What events can we do that help people? And, it's one of those things where you just create these like events and these situations where people connect a little bit more, and that bit becomes the foundation for friendships that carry on years after the organization maybe is not even there anymore. So, for example, I went to Startup Weekend back in 2012. It was an education one. And that's where I met Oret. And I remember coming back from work being very tired, and I forgot that I signed up for it. And I was just planning to head back home and go to sleep and watch Netflix. And instead I was like, nah, maybe I should go to this thing. Maybe I can end a meeting, somebody, I should do this. So I went even though I was tired, but I met Oret, who was the leader of Orlando Tech. And had I not gone, I maybe wouldn't have met him. I wouldn't have met him or Ron Benziv or a bunch of other people that have been around in this community. That's when I met them. I met them during that weekend. And then I realized, oh, these kind of events are really important. And then that was a lot of what we did at Orlando Tech.
Yeah, that's yeah, you're right, man. Orlando Tech. Oret was just on our last founders talk.
And Kyle, you were early part of Orlando Tech. Like
it was,
you were one of the people.
Yeah, I was one of the people. Croy and Rob Schiller and Oret, myself. But yeah, that was a really good community. Man, listen, this talk was really cool. Just learning about, like I said, the story. It completely makes sense. Like what you do today, I can see how your story has led to that. your self-awareness and fearlessness in terms of iterating, taking in that feedback, using that feedback, is really amazing. Talking about things in very simplistic manners or simplistic ways is really good. So I think that our funding is secure because this was really, really excellent. You didn't let us down. And so you've made the case for why Orlando should be one of the stops that social entrepreneurs should make along their journey because of people like you. So I really appreciate your time with us today, man.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate what the both of you are doing, Kyle and Ben, and the rest of your team. And to all of you, I really appreciate what you guys are doing on your entrepreneurial journey. I appreciate you guys doing something for social good. Life is not worth living unless you have like really good people around you and really good things, and making society better. So it's really important, all the things that you're doing, because otherwise, you know, we're all living life. We need good things around us.
The ladies in the accounting room.
Yeah, you don't want to be them. You don't want to be them, right? Like life is not good if you're them. So
just
you guys,
for the record, I'm sure there are some accountants out there, men and women, who really enjoy and love their life. So we're not making a statement.
Yeah, my wife's a CPA, right? So like she's she's not going to become them, you know, like realize have fun in life as you're moving along, do good things.